More now on the situation in Gaza. A top US general has reportedly laid out an alternative plan to Israel's imminent ground offensive in Rafah. Let's get more on this with our military analyst Sean Bell, who joins us here in the studio. Good afternoon, Sean.
Afternoon, Leah. Happy Easter.
Happy Easter to you too. I wonder if we could start from a military perspective here. What do you make of the comments?
Yeah, there's been growing international concern that any IDF offensive into Rafah could end up, as some United Nations correspondents say, will be a bloodbath. Now, since the United Nations Security Council resolution, which was sort of designed to cause a halt, it's all gone a bit quiet, hasn't it? But that ceasefire, that operational pause, is due to come to an end at the end of Ramadan, which is scheduled to be about the 9th of April. But US President Biden has made absolutely clear that actually the world will not tolerate mass casualties amongst the 1.3 million people. As a result, we understand the chairman of the US Joint Chiefs of Staff, a guy called General Charles Brown, in a recent chat with his IDF contemporaries, apparently was outlining some alternative military options for going into Rafah. They included the use of technology to try to maintain the security between the Gaza-Egyptian border. That's to stop smuggling, but also potentially to stop Hamas fighters leaving. It called for isolating Rafah city, targeted raids against Hamas fighters, and potentially setting up a sort of joint control room as well. All of this seems to actually support Netanyahu's objective of getting after those last 4 battalions of Hamas fighters.
But what's your sense, though, Sean? What do you think this will look like on the ground?
Well, there's a slight irony here at the moment because the UN Security Council resolution was designed to bring the war to an end. It was enabled, although it was US abstention, but it was enabled by the US. Yet here they are apparently helping the IDF come up with a plan to restart the war. Now, there is widespread recognition that Hamas's tenure in power in Gaza is probably going to come to an end. But if there was a military offensive into Rafah, it would be a very, very difficult. We're seeing just part of it now. These are fairly old pictures. The situation's got much worse now. And imagine trying to conduct a military operation through this sort of, with 1.3 million in the confines, and whether it's IDF enabled, enacted, or American enabled, it would still be incredibly dangerous. And of course, there is a grave risk with the US intervening like this, that it could get embroiled or even become complicit in a mass casualty event. Very, very interesting intervention by the US.
Why do you think it's being announced now, then?
Part of it, I think, is because the UN Security Council, although the US abstained, it did embolden Hamas because by drawing the war to an end, potentially, Hamas would have seen a future where it had survived and therefore it would have felt emboldened at the negotiations. Netanyahu, that's why he cancelled his visit to the US straight away afterwards. He also withdrew his people from negotiating in Cairo. By the US now apparently leaning in to provide support to Israel's military objectives, it just strengthens Israel's hand when it comes to negotiating with Hamas. It shows their determination to continue. And of course, Netanyahu has actually resent his people today. We're expecting the Israelis to rejoin those negotiations. Now, if Hamas is a spent force in Gaza, the real question is then either does the Hamas leadership leave under negotiation, or do they get killed in the subsequent offensive? And I think that's what negotiations about now, really. It's about how do the hostages get released, what's the future for the Hamas leadership, and also how many Palestinian prisoners get released. Because if it fails, it's pretty clear that the Rafah offensive will get underway. The stakes couldn't be higher.